Hey, YouTube, welcome into DawgNation Daily, daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented today by Engineered Solutions of Georgia and live over here on Facebook as well. Good to have all of you with us. I'm not getting as much natural light today from my kitchen window as I'm used to because it is pretty rainy and dark outside. But nonetheless, we should be in an okay position to kind of rock and roll and get going here. So we'll look forward to taking a lot of your comments on today's show. I'll also invite you to check out today's edition of the podcast, DawgNation Daily, presented by ESOG. I had a really, really great conversation with Jeff Sintel on there. And I told Jeff at the end of the discussion, it was almost like getting back to old times again. It was almost like, football the way we've kind of come to expect it. A lot of really, really good chat and discussion with him. Thomas Bates, welcome in on the Facebook broadcast. Good to have you here. So if you're looking for some good old school classic recruiting talk, Jordan Harris says, football me, please. And yeah, Jordan, we intend to do that for you today. But if you're looking for some of that here today, just really, really good stuff with Jeff Sintel. In fact, let me give you a few of the notes that we kind of got into with Jeff today. Maybe a reason why you'll want to check out the full podcast later on. And then eventually, over the course of the next couple of days, then we've got the technology worked out that we're going to be able to start delivering these interviews to you back on video again. We're obviously going to be working from home here for a little while longer, but I think we have a chance to do that coming up on video here pretty soon. So stay tuned for more on that. But for now, let me give you a few of the things that I got into with Jeff for the podcast interview today. We do talk about what's next for Georgia, the running back position after Travion Walker's Ohio State commitment. As I've told many of you, the Henderson thing was not necessarily surprising news. I think we sort of expected that he'd go to the Buckeyes, and it certainly seemed like he'd accelerated his process a lot over the last couple of weeks. It's just simply a question now of where Georgia goes from there. And there's no shortage of names, Donovan Edwards among the rest, that Georgia will consider there. So I got more into detail with that with Jeff. We also talked about Jonathan Jefferson, the recent Georgia defensive line commit. You see if I can position my chair a little bit better, sort of frame myself up a little bit better. We talked about Jonathan Jefferson, the recent defensive line commit. And the one thing that jumps out to you about Jefferson is, first of all, interesting backstory. His dad was a boxer. That's kind of a cool thing. But beyond that, Jefferson's a basketball player, much the same way that Trayvon Walker was. And, Trayvon Walker, really brought that athleticism to the defensive line position. It seems like Jefferson's got a version of that too. Kirby Smart has said he wants athletic defensive tackles. He wants those guys that can do more than just push and shove there on the interior. And it seems like Jefferson has a chance to be one of those guys. So that's something we get into with Jeff. Very, very complimentary words, both from five-star cornerback Tony Grimes about Georgia, and also apparently Georgia, some very complimentary words back towards Grimes. That's a recruiting story worth following now. We'll do a lot more of that with Jeff Sintel here today. I also kind of get into a lot with Dylan Fairchild, who offensive lineman from West Forsyth, who recently earned a Georgia offer. And there are a couple of fascinating things about Fairchild. One of those in particular is he's a wrestler. He's a guy that has been praised for his versatility. And when you read between the lines, and I did a lot with this with Jeff today, when you read between the lines on Fairchild, the kinds of offensive linemen that Matt Luke seems to prefer in comparison to Sam Pittman, you really get the sense this Georgia offensive line may be about to look a little different here with Matt Luke at the helm as offensive line coach, as opposed to what it was with Sam Pittman the last couple of years. Pittman seemingly favoring those huge maulers, 330-plus pound guys. It seems like Luke may favor guys who can move around a bit more, which would make sense to kind of go along with the presence of a Todd Monken offense and everything else. But in terms of the kinds of recruits who are being valued right now, you do seem to see a little bit of an alteration here, which might be a fun thing to think about a new look Georgia offense really becoming that way because of a little bit different kind of offensive lineman this program is going to value with Matt Luke there at the helm. So that's worth paying attention to. And then I'm going to talk to you in a minute more about a really cool DeAndre Swift video. I'm going to feature some of the audio for this on the podcast edition of our show today. But Swift clearly has been influenced by his time growing up in Philadelphia and inspired to move on from his hometown, come to a place like Georgia where he thought he could, be set up on a platform to make the NFL, and then obviously make good on that promise to his hometown. This is really good stuff, and it's in connection with a trading card company. And I grew up as a huge sports card fan, so we'll talk more about that on the show. The Venn diagram of people who like Georgia football stories and like football card stories, I'm right squarely in the epicenter of that Venn diagram, so we'll do a good bit on that. I'll give you a quick programming note here, then we'll take a few more of your comments. So as I'm speaking now to you all live, Kirby Smart's also doing a teleconference with Mike Griffith, Connor Riley. So there'll be some news coming from Kirby here today. So stay close to DawgNation.com. There'll be some legit, actual football news coming out of a press conference with Kirby Smart. So you're going to want to get that, and we'll talk more about that coming up. Ricky Young says the beard's coming in strong. Yeah, it is starting to come in strong. I'll tell you a quick funny story about this. And some of y'all who've had beards longer than me probably know more about this. So lately I've been having an issue. I'm being completely serious for a moment. So anytime when I drink something, whether it be coffee in the morning, glass of water, or whatever else you might imbibe over the course of the day, anytime I drink something, it's like just rolling down my face. And for the longest time, I couldn't figure out what was going on. I was wondering, have I forgotten how to drink? Because you put the glass to your face or mug, whatever else, you drink, and then all of a sudden you just got this, it's like, being a baby or something. You just got stuff just spilling down. What I realized is like the cup was like hitting me above my lip, and then it was touching the whiskers, and it was like rolling down the whiskers. And so literally I was like getting stuff like all over my shirt and everything else every time I was drinking anything. I've had to learn how to like put my mouth to a glass with facial hair. I didn't realize that was going to be so different, but I was legitimately having a hard time drinking and like just watching whatever liquid I was trying to ingest just like spilling all down my shirt. So that's been a little bit different to get used to. Johnny Lester on YouTube, I was mentioning Matt Luke a moment ago. He says Matt Luke's a stud. He's going to add tremendously to this offense. Can't wait. I think that Johnny's probably right on both those fronts. And something else I'm going to do a little bit more over in the podcast today, and more in reference to Dan Lanning, but I think also Matt Luke's an example of this. To hire someone like Luke as quickly as Georgia did is really a pretty big flex move for Kirby Smart. That's really pretty impressive. And obviously, Luke's going to have pressure to deliver results, and we kind of get all of that. We understand all of that. However, I don't think you can overlook in terms of losing an offensive line coach in a way that you would not have predicted that you would lose one. It'd be one thing if your offensive line coach in a typical circumstance had a chance to go be somebody's offensive coordinator or whatever else. But Sam Pittman had a chance to leave Georgia and go become Arkansas head coach. That's the kind of upward mobility that you don't typically see. And so in a lot of situations, a program that dealt something like that, in this case, Georgia, might have been caught a little bit flat-footed and might not have had, by the way, that's not a coronavirus-related cough, by the way. But nonetheless, if you're Georgia, to be able to move as quickly as you did, Kirby Smart, from Pittman to find Matt Luke, I mean, that's pretty impressive work by Kirby Smart. And there's also a stroke of luck involved with it as well. ESPN has recently kind of highlighted how it was that Lane Kiffin ended up at Ole Miss and Mike Leach ended up at Mississippi State. And obviously the events of last year's Egg Bowl factored into that pretty heavily, which eventually cost Matt Luke his job. And I've said before that I think that the cozy relationship between Kiffin and Leach and the media is kind of weird. And I think that the media has done a lot to prop both Kiffin and Leach up. But in this particular case, it probably is true that if the Egg Bowl plays a little bit differently, then Matt Luke might not have been Georgia's to hire. So, from that standpoint, you'll take the luck when you can get it, I guess. James Moore says all these coaches are going to hit the roof when these players come back. Yeah, they're going to be shot out of a cannon. There's no doubt about that. Jeffrey Duran says, do you think the season will happen? Jeffrey, I do. And I was very happy to see Reese Davis go on. I think it was Get Up. It was one of the ESPN shows. And he was asked about what Kirk Herbstreit said on Friday about Herbstreit's prediction that there would be no season. And Reese Davis, who was obviously a friend of Herbstreit's, and it's not a jab at Kirk, but Reese Davis said that that he thought that what Herbstreit said was premature. And I totally agree as well. And, I've even seen other sports writers in the last couple of days kind of, highlighting these things. There's a reason why we tell sports writers to stick to sports, because a lot of times when they veer outside of sports, they're just easily fooled. And people have kind of highlighted what's happened in Virginia, where there was a stay-in-place order extended into the month of June. The truth is that's not a binding referendum. That can be changed at any point in time. That just because you've got one state saying, hey, we're going to keep it locked down until June, that doesn't have to remain in place. Now, it might, and it may extend beyond that. I mean, some of the news that you've seen the last couple of days, I've really tried to limit my diet when it comes to news intake right now. But some of the news we've gotten in the last 24 hours has not been that great, or 48 hours, I should say, has not been that great. So, it's a fact of the matter that, we are nowhere near out of the woods on this yet. And you watch the news, you kind of get some examples of that. That's one of the reasons why we try to stay away from that here on this show, because I want to provide an outlet and a break from some of that kind of stuff. And right now, we're still very much in it. But listen, July, August, September, that's a long time from now still. And I think there's a lot good that can happen between now and then. And if the world's not better then we'll deal with that then. But for now, I think the appropriate attitude is one that Reese Davis has recently expressed, and one we've tried to express around here, which is, don't listen to these sports writers who are so hungry for content that they're, willing to bring sort of a faulty set of information. So, yeah, our operation around here is that the football season will take place as scheduled, and we're going to keep that attitude in place until we're told otherwise. Kylan and Susan Richter checking in from Gray Golf Country down in Moultrie, Georgia. Appreciate y'all being a part of the program. What else was going on? Travis Sugar says, I hope that Newman is working with wideouts. Yeah, I don't know how much any of these guys are going to work together right now. In some cases, they may just be, living good ways apart from each other. In other places, we're kind of limited. First of all, it's the Jake Fromm story of the other day kind of shows you, in addition to having a hard time getting together with people, in some cases, you're having a hard time finding a place you can do a workout. I know some personal coaches, even though they have, less than 10 people working together, are having some trouble right now because they can't get a facility to have their workouts in. And so that's obviously a huge challenge. And, for Newman, in terms of the timing chemistry with his receivers, he may not be getting much of that right now because not only can you not bridge the gap geographically speaking to get together, but even if you could get together, there's no place to go. That's an issue right now. Looks like the YouTube folks are back arguing again, which I guess means we're getting close to being back to normal over there. Keith Folds wants to block somebody. All right, let's see what else is going on over here. Colby Curry says Georgia's goal is to beat up on Florida on the way to a national championship. You're right about that, Colby. You better believe that. Paul Amerson, thanks for the kind words on the beard, kind of growing in here. Here's funny from Joel Moody, to go back to what I said earlier. He says, I've had a beard for 40 years, and I don't have a single shirt without a stain on it. Yeah, I didn't know that, Joel, but I found that out pretty quickly. Just stuff just pouring down. Just pouring down my face. Mike D says that I heard Greg Sankey on Golick and Wingo earlier. I did not, but I would love to, because I think that Sankey's actually been pretty good on this thus far. And of all, with a prediction about what's going to happen to Florida, which is fun to be able to see. Colby Curry says Todd Monken confirmed as quarterback coach too. I don't know if that's coming out of the recent stuff from Kirby or not. I really, some of y'all, if you're following the Kirby news, you're going to know more about this than I do. Johnny Lester says Jacksonville, Georgia. I like the sound of that for sure. Scott Harris says been away for a while, been missing the content, but we should have plenty to talk about right now. Yeah, listen. Obviously, we're not getting the spring practice we would have wanted to get, but we're still got plenty to talk about. We're still having a good time doing it, and it's very therapeutic for me. Hunter Davis says he's getting interruptions. I haven't noticed that. Jordan Harris says he is there as well, though. I'm sorry. I hope that's not too true. I hope it's okay. Johnny Lester says the best part of the Kirby Smart era is dominating Florida. Yeah, boy, that's been fun to see thus far. If you're just joining us, I know it's a little darker here today. I'm usually depending on my kitchen light to give me a little natural light, and it's not very bright outside here today. Michael Webb says, going back to the Egg Bowl thing, if nothing else, it shouldn't be boring. You got two coaches who are not shy about taking shots on the field or off. And well, if you have these two coaches who are really good friends, is that going to, I guess, mute the rivalry a bit? I'm curious to see how that goes. Shelton Tucker says beards keep stuff for a few days eating in it. That's a pleasant thought to think about right about now. Whether it be praying for that, just praying for our economy, praying for everything else. I think it's really, really challenging dealing with all the unknowns that are out there. And, no one has the answers, right? And we have to sort of be able to live with that uncertainty, which makes, I think, prayer all the more important. John Paul Williams says, may God bless you all. Very kind thing to be able to hear. Kyle and Susan Richter says, what is the betting line on who gets fired first, Kiffin or Leach? So what's funny about that is like, and I know I've probably bored y'all with this take, but you look around the media loves Leach. I mean, the media, because he's very accessible, he gives them funny quotes. The media has just forgiven all kinds of odd things from Leach's, background. I mean, this has got a little bit of a checkered past, and the media, for the most part, glosses over that because they like him, and that's just, par for the course. But it's just not going to. So that doesn't mean he won't accumulate yards, and it doesn't mean he won't score points. With KJ Costello as his quarterback, my guess is there'll be a lot of yards and a lot of points. But if you go back and watch some of those Texas Tech games when he was the coach in Lubbock, you saw an example of that as well, where it's like, you're moving the football. In some cases, you're getting in the end zone, but over the course of a game, you just sort of get worn down. So, I mean, the games themselves may be relatively exciting, but in terms of scoring more points than your opponent, I think that's actually going to come pretty difficult for Mike Leach. Antoine Middleton on the subject of quarterbacks, one of them transferring. Yeah, I mean, obviously you have very little control over that, right? I mean, it's just very well understood that that when you have a lot of quarterbacks into a competition, and right now Georgia's got a lot of quarterbacks on campus after not really having enough. Now they've got probably the right amount. And for the guy who's the odd man out, and someone will be the odd man out in all of this, for the guy who's the odd man out, it's going to be hard to keep him. Kirby Smart has acknowledged, and Kirby Smart is as much of a control freak, someone who tries to influence outcomes as much as probably anybody you'll ever see. And even he's acknowledged that to a certain extent, you just can't do a ton to keep a lot of quarterbacks happy. So that's just the nature of the beast. And I don't think you worry about that. I think you keep trying to bring in good guys for 2021, good guys for 2022, and you sort of let the chips fall where they may. I think that's what's fair. And I think the one thing as a program you owe it to your quarterbacks to do is make it an. If you can do that, then I think you feel good about the outcome no matter what it is. Let's do a few more comments here. 7. They just seem that way. But thanks for the kind words. Let's see what else. I'm going to talk about this DeAndre Swift thing in a moment, what I'm going to do more of on the podcast here today. Jordan Harris says, what's your order for the top 3 receivers for next season? So I'll go Pickens 1. I'm going to take a bet on the health for Dominic Blaylock 2nd. By the way, our buddy Chip Towers from the HAC had a good update on Dominic Blaylock. You can check that out. And then I might go – who am I going to go with number 3? I think I know this is like Groundhog Day, but I think there's still something very interesting to be heard from Demetrius Robertson in a Todd Monken offense. I'm still very interested in Robertson here in this Todd Monken offense. Very interested in that. Bob Fikay, thanks for the kind words. Appreciate that. Let me also say thanks to our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia for making all this possible. Engineered Solutions of Georgia is really good if you're dealing with a waterproofing issue or a foundation problem. And by the way, we've had so much rain that you're probably noticing more of that around your house than you ever had before. Go down to the basement, you see a wet spot. That water came from somewhere. If it got into the house one time before, there is more water coming at a certain point in time. And that's all the reason why you want to trust my friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia, which is to say nothing of the potential foundation issue. You see those cracks in the foundation. That's the kind of thing that in normal circumstances can be easy to want to put off. And given what you're dealing with, with your job or your, coronavirus, everything else, maybe even more tempting to put something like that off. But the truth is those problems over the course of time will get worse if they're not dealt with. And if you're at home a lot more, you're just noticing this kind of thing. And I cannot more strongly recommend my friends at ESOG. First of all, they're a proud partner of UGA, so they're really fun to do business with there in that regard. Big Georgia fans. That's a really good thing. And they're a solutions-based company, which means in a lot of cases, water or foundation or stuff like that can be a simple fix. If it's a simple fix, they'll just tell you to go to the hardware store and get something like that taken care of. Or in a more substantial situation, they're the ones to trust because they have 2 full-time engineers on staff. So you can give them a call. Number to do so. My kids made the graphic, 678 ESOG now. That's 6. Here is DeAndre Swift on Twitter. All right. So this is a really cool video from Swift. It's on his Twitter account, and it's from Panini, the trading card company. And he's talking about basically getting, ready for his Donruss rated rookie football card. And he's kind of going through the NFL Combine and kind of why it was that he wanted to come to Georgia, why it was he wanted to get out of Philadelphia. It's just a really inspiring story. I think that Swift has a really natural toughness to him. And I think that toughness just gives him a lot of credibility when he talks. It's like you believe everything he says just because it kind of comes from a place deep within him, it seems. And this is obviously an example of that. And as I told some of our viewers a little earlier in our broadcast, I was a huge sports card fan growing up. Baseball cards, football cards, basketball cards, whatever else. I still like them. My son has kind of gotten into it, which is really fun. But huge fan of sports cards growing up. Just love them. And so to like see the classic old school rated rookie logo at the end of this video, and to hear Swift's excitement about being featured on a trading card, it's like the perfect combination of everything that I love. Georgia football, sports cards, all together right there is one. And if you listen to the podcast later on, DawgNation Daily, presented by ESOG, you can hear more of the audio for this. I can't really play it to you from my phone through the computer. That doesn't sound too good. But I will be able to give you the audio of this when we do the podcast later on. And it'll just be a reminder of the fact that Georgia had itself a special one when it comes to DeAndre. Is that touchdown that Swift scored in the 2017 SEC championship game that led to a 28-7 Georgia victory. That was a really cool and special moment. I think in some respects that touchdown kind of gets lost to time because of what happened after that in the Rose Bowl, and then obviously the disappointment of the Alabama game. And, some of those moments become more prominently remembered. But as a freshman, to put an SEC championship game on ice against a hated rival like Auburn, that is no matter who comes after him and no matter what Georgia does moving forward, I think that DeAndre Swift will be viewed and thought of as a truly, truly special Georgia player. And we'll talk more about him on the podcast here today. Pete Williams, the subject of Carson Beck, says he's not going anywhere. Newman's only got 1 year to play. Yeah, the one thing you won't hear me do a lot of is making predictions about who's going to win what battle for playing time. I don't really do that with any position group for the most part. I just want to put a lot of good guys into a competition and see how it shakes out. So beyond Jamie Newman in 2020, you head to 2021. Does Beck emerge as the guy then? Is it Dwan Mathis? Does a guy like Brock Vandagriff step in as a freshman have a chance to win that job? I would say all three of those are possibilities, and I'm not going to make much of a prediction one way or another about who it's going to be. I think you have to leave the door open to be surprised. And obviously I think that Beck and Mathis have both kind of expressed the right attitude, because when Mathis came in, he knew Fromm was going to be here. And when Beck came in, he assumed Fromm might still be here. So they've both spoken about their willingness to learn from a guy for a year, things along those lines. And instead of it being Fromm in 2020, it's going to be Jamie Newman in 2020. But I think that Newman in his own right has plenty that you can learn from. So he back up Newman this upcoming year and then eventually become the heir apparent to Newman after that. I would expect that both Newman and Beck will have the right attitude on that front. Matt Rukavina checking in today. Good to be able to see. Let's see what else is going on here. Some of y'all are just so busy arguing. There's not really a whole lot else going on up there right now. Hunter Davis talking about Vandagriff and Beck switching in and out versus Clemson. So Hunter Davis already got a quarterback pecking order in place for the 2021 season opener against Clemson, which will obviously be a little bit of a callback to, I guess, the last time these two teams for the rest of his career would look like. Green Soldier says, who's the best quarterback in college football history? That's a very good question. Who is the answer to this question? Who is the answer to this question? Single season, I mean, obviously what Vince Young did for Texas in 2005, certainly really impressive in terms of the guys. Boy, that's a tough question. I have to think about that a little bit more. Dallas Schwartz checking in from North California. Good to see you there. Let's see what else. Philip Jordan Wells checking in. Good to be able to see that. I'm also going to talk today on the podcast about Dan Lanning a little bit. Lanning had a nice video where he, like a lot of these Georgia coaches have done, is just the personality on display. I mean, Lanning looks like a seasoned coach. Easy to forget that he's still relatively young and only a couple of years into a role as Georgia defensive coordinator. And in terms of Georgia having the success that it's had, in some cases, according to some national experts, being set up for success more so than maybe even Alabama this year, a team that has to play in September, I don't think you want to gloss over Smart's successful hire of Lanning, who has proven himself to be a very good defensive coordinator. I don't think you want to gloss over that as an important part of that formula, because if you look at Alabama, you can arguably say that Alabama has made consecutive unsuccessful defensive coordinator hires. Tosh Lapoy was turned into the scapegoat for why Alabama did not win the national championship in 2018. There are plenty of Alabama fans who don't like Pete Golding, the Crimson Tide's current defensive coordinator. So Kirby Smart, essentially picked a guy like Lanning from obscurity, brought him to the Georgia staff, then promoted him as defensive coordinator. And the rest has sort of been history, where I think that Lanning right now, even though Kirby Smart's obviously still very influential with his defense, Lanning has the look of a coach on the rise here. And Smart, for hiring Lanning, I think should get a lot of credit for that. Or, initially hiring him and then kind of fostering him along to eventually be promoted to defensive coordinator. That's a successful hire and something that Smart should get some credit for. And the video that Lanning has out there right now is a little bit of a reminder of that. Jay Shipes, on the subject of top quarterback, mentioning that Johnny Manziel was fun. Yeah, the thing about Manziel is that because the rest of his life turned out to be kind of weird, and I think that's still ongoing today, and I think it's easy to forget how good he was. Back in 2012, he goes into Tuscaloosa, beats Alabama on the road. And at the time, you would have thought that A&M was about to become a major player in the SEC West. Now, that eventually didn't really happen. Manziel had a great career, but the emergence of the Aggies under Kevin Sumlin didn't take place the way that it seemed like it would there at that time. But I'm sure you can find highlights of that Texas A&M Alabama game from 2012. Manziel was thrilling. And then the following year, remember the old Chick-fil-A Bowl game with a very good Duke team against A&M and the comeback that Manziel led that night? Manziel became a little bit of a joke, right? But if you go back and watch him at Texas A&M, the highlights are spectacular. The plays, he was very, very good. Very good. And he's one of those guys that the personality and the way it ends for him as a player ends up just turning him into a punchline, turning him into a joke. But if you had to play against him, if you had to deal with him, he was no joke then. He was no joke then. George Herndon says it was wasted talent for Manziel, and I guess maybe it probably was. Maybe it probably was. Steven Vinzani says, looking back, when I played spring ball, definitely helped learn the plays quicker, but not having spring ball is not a major deal. Fall camp is what really matters. I think that's probably true. And Steven, I'd love to see these teams get a little longer version of that, whether it be, I think it's been compared to like an NFL style mini camp ahead of summer camp. That'd be great to be able to see. The one thing that I continue to say I don't want to hear, though, is a lot of coaches kind of saying, well, if we don't have perfect conditions, we can't be out there on the football field. I don't want to hear that. I want to make the best of the situation, get out there and play. Even, there was somebody on Twitter the other day saying, how would you feel if the season did take place and then your rival won a national championship? This is one of those years where I think the act of actually playing the games is more important than success for my team, which is not to say that I don't want Georgia to do well and win it all. I obviously do. But just given the situation, what's happening in the world, just getting back to being able to play games for this particular year, I think is more important than that. So one way or another, whether it be pristine conditions, beautifully played games or not, we just need games taking place. A lot of arguing over here on YouTube. Let's go back over to Facebook here for a moment. Randy Weatherford says that DeAndre Swift's dad looks like he's a strength and conditioning coach, as swole as he is. Yeah, that's always been amazing to see. Really, really very impressive physical condition for Mr. Swift. And obviously, Chris Milton kind of steps into that role now as the running back dad who's very well put together for the Georgia team here moving forward. It's kind of funny how you trade out Darren Swift for Chris Milton, and in a lot of ways don't skip a beat on that, for sure. Matt Talley on the subject of DeJuan Mathis and how the Georgia staff, or at least kind of stepped in to, as Mathis's family has said, really save his life back when he was dealing with that brain aneurysm thing. It was a scary situation, and I'm just really thankful for DeJuan. It's all kind of worked out the way that it has. Let's see what else is going on over here on Facebook here for a moment. P. Williams says, let's see how Mathis does after he starts taking some hits. And that's probably a fair thing, to bring up. He's still got a little bit of a ways to go, it seems, before you get there, but seems to be progressing nicely. Kyle Norton giving some credit to Tim Tebow as a very good quarterback. Yeah, even as a Gator hater, you got to say that Tim Tebow is a very good college quarterback. That's very true. Very true. Matt Talley with a funny comment. Can't say that was unnoticed by me. Let's see what else. By the way, I hope the homeschool thing is going well for y'all here right now. Michael Webb on Facebook, and I'll go back to YouTube in a moment. I'm just trying to get some Facebook comments. Sometimes I have to scroll to see them. He says, I hope that Lanning takes the Brent Venables route and stays home for a long time. You would think it would need to be an elite job to lure him away. So I'll not pretend to be an expert on what's gone on with Brent Venables at Clemson. I don't know why he stayed there for such a long time. I'm not aware of that. I have a sneaking suspicion that Georgia fans won't get quite so lucky with Dan Lanning. I just think he looks like a head coach. I think he'll eventually be one. I don't really quite know how Clemson's kind of gotten so lucky to keep Venables as long as it has, but somehow I have a hard time imagining Georgia will be that lucky when it comes to Dan Lanning. That's just my guess anyway. Let's see what else. Matt Rukavina says the Green Soldier sent an unprovoked attack to Facebook, so Rukavina had to respond in kind. Good to know the different comment sections are still battling with each other. Chris Slim White mentions Doug Flutie is an all-time great college quarterback. Yeah, great moments for Boston College back in the mid-'80s. I will admit that I didn't see a ton of that, but obviously the huge Hail Mary throw against Miami, I've seen that a million times. Raymond Cox, kind of a funny line on Johnny Manziel, calling him the Heisman. Pretty funny. Van West says Manziel single-handedly beat Alabama in 2012. That was a great performance. It was a great performance. Oh, this is a really good one. Frank Crowder mentions Tommy Frazier. That Nebraska 95 team was amazing. And Frazier really was. It'd be, if you're putting together a list of like all-time great college quarterbacks, Frazier definitely has to be on there. Just the sport was way different back then, right? But Tommy Frazier was amazing. Frank, I'm glad you mentioned for that. He was an amazing, amazing college player. And really, I don't really know where he ranked. When they did the list of all-time great college players back during the previous season, how high did Frazier get on that list? He should have been very high. Should have been very, very high. I'll also make this about UGA for a moment. The other thing about quarterbacks at Georgia, when you make the list of best quarterbacks at UGA, way back in the annals of history, Johnny Roush. I've always felt like Roush was a player that has never gotten enough credit for a great career at UGA. I'm talking about a long time ago. I believe that when he left Georgia, am I right about this? Now, the record's been broken a gazillion times since then, but wasn't he the NCAA's all-time passing leader when he left Georgia? And this is like back in the 40s or whatever, so we're talking about a million years ago. But great career. He went on to be a head coach and led the Raiders to a Super Bowl in the NFL. So just a great – he didn't win the Super Bowl, but he coached in it. He played in it, or he coached the Raiders in the Super Bowl. So he had a great football career, and one of those guys that when it comes to like legends at Georgia has never quite gotten enough credit. I'm not telling you he's on the list of like greatest quarterbacks of all time, but when you're making the list of top UGA quarterbacks, I've always sort of felt like Roush, because of how long ago it was, has kind of gotten overlooked there in that regard. Let's see a few more of these. Bad tally. Very funny. Mary Justice has a really good point here. She says, all of this is teaching us that we don't have to be perfect. Many are experimenting in the kitchen. It's about family time and learning how to just dare to care about it. Would have been a time that, doing DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia, with no graphics, with no microphone, with those kinds of things, would have made me very nervous. There's a certain standard that I like to uphold, and doing the show that would have made me very nervous. But as Mary said, forget perfect and just do the best you can to communicate with people and maintain a relationship with people. And that's what I'm doing right now through the podcast and through the video show, and still making what we do available on radio, just doing our part to kind of figure out a way to get that done. And as she said, experimenting in the kitchen, just sort of figuring out what ingredients you have and figuring out how you can sort of figure out a way not to have to go back to the grocery store too soon, and just sort of make the most of the situation. And in some cases, maybe a little too many calories here, or a little too much of this, or in some cases, maybe, not quite Instagram worthy, whatever else, but just sort of getting it done. And, Mary's right about that. I think all of us have had to just sort of be thankful for what we do have and make the most of the situation. And if we can just get through this dadgum thing, I do think we'll be better for it. I do. Let's do a few more over here. By the way, as we do them, speaking of graphics and the lack thereof, let me give you my homemade R.S. Andrews graphic as we get ready to roll into our R.S. Andrews cool down. I'll remind you that air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric, R.S. Andrews can do all of that for you. And of course, as we head into a time of the year where more of you are home, the last thing you want is a shower that stops working, right? No hot water coming out of your shower. Well, that's, all the more reason why if yours goes out, R.S. Andrews can do the work for you, get that replaced many times in the same day. So you can't go without hot water this time of year when you're all at home so much more often. So if you're running into that issue, R.S. Andrews can deliver a smile for you because story after story, that's what R.S. Andrews been doing. They've been delivering smiles. Find them online at rsandrews.com. As we roll into our R.S. Andrews cool down here, we'll do about 5 more minutes of comments. Then after that, I've got to get running and kind of get going here. Steve Shafini checking in, looks like, into our Facebook comment section. Good to see him here today. BJ Wise talking about doing some social distancing on the leg. Yeah, one of the great ways to sort of put a good bit of distance between yourself and somebody else is on that leg. That's a pretty nice way to do that. Jamie Huff says Jordan Davis staying in shape is big. Yeah, Davis is one of those guys. I said it yesterday during our video. Pound for pound, among the more important players in the Georgia roster. And I'd say pound for pound, both literally and figuratively, because given how big that he is. But Davis as a big man is very, very as a super heavyweight, right? As a super heavyweight is in very good physical condition. At least it seems to be the case. And I think Jamie's right. There are a few players in the Georgia roster who, finding a way to maintain that status is important. He may be among the most important. I think it's probably a pretty good point. Eric DeVorncy says, think about how long Kirby Smart stayed at Alabama. It's crazy that no one scooped him up sooner. And Smart was probably one of those guys that did have a chance to leave for certain head coaching jobs. But a lot of my friends who are high school coaches will tell you this. A lot of you are high school coaches, or you have friends that are high school coaches. You know that there are certain jobs that when you take them, it's sort of hard to get the next job. You may get a head coaching position, but the fact of the matter is, and like I said, we have a lot of high school coaches who watch us, and I have a lot of friends who are high school coaches, and this is just a practical reality. There are certain head coaching jobs that if you take that job, it becomes very hard to get a different job because you're not going to win enough to get the attention of a bigger and better school. That's just kind of the way that it goes sometimes. So you do have to be careful about the head coaching position that you take. Some people are really, really hungry for that head coaching position, and they're just going to get somewhere and just sort of get locked in and kind of get lost. At the college level, I think that's probably true as well, where, Mark Richt was like this. Richt at Florida State as offensive coordinator probably had opportunities to become a head coach too, but he chose to wait. He was happy with the job that he had. For the time, he was making pretty good money, and his reputation only grew the longer he stayed in Tallahassee. I think that Kirby Smart was probably pretty similar there in that regard. By being choosy, by being patient, by continuing to have great success at Alabama, his coaching stature rose. And obviously it worked out perfectly. And of course, the legend goes that he was on the verge of finally taking the South Carolina job when Georgia said, oh, we've got to scoop in. We've got to make sure we get Kirby Smart before he goes somewhere else. And the rest obviously is history. But it would certainly seem like Smart, who has kind of always had a deliberate process in place, really put a lot of thought into every move that he's made, how he wanted to handle things when he first took over at Georgia. The jobs that he chose to probably ignore over the years, probably part of that process as well. I think it's probably a pretty good point. Jordan Harris says, I'm not liking YouTube because of all the arguing. Sometimes it's just sort of hard to find an on-topic comment. I get that somebody comes over there and wants to spend some time here and get y'all stirred up. But if all you're doing is responding to him, then it becomes a little hard for me to find somebody to talk to. Scott Harris says, let's be realistic. Do we really think the CDC is going to let 100,000 people congregate anytime soon? I hate it, but I just don't see it. So, Scott, here's my realistic answer. I don't know what the world's going to look like 5 months from now. But 5 months is a long time. It is. And so I think any kind of gloom and doom, I'm not saying you're being gloom and doom, but some sort of gloom and doom projection about September we're still March. We still got one more day left in March. Some sort of doom and gloom projection about that just doesn't do me any good. So you may very well be right. The fact of the matter is, it's not going away tomorrow. The news is probably going to be worse on Wednesday than it is on Tuesday, and worse on Thursday than it was on Wednesday. At least for now, that's the cycle that we're kind of in. But 5 months is still a long time from now. And that's going to be my stance. And when it's 4 months, I'm going to say 4 months is still a long time from now. When it's 3 months, I'm going to say, well, that's a little less time, but still 3 months is 3 months. And on we're going to go here. So if the season is altered, that's something to deal with then. But for right now, I think it's important for our society to have a picture in our mind of a better, happier, healthier day. I think it helps us stay locked down for 2 weeks. There's an element of that that's probably true. And so picturing a happier tomorrow in order to endure what we need to do today, I think it's just part of human nature. Jordan Harris says he thinks that Kenny McIntosh is going to surprise us all. McIntosh has a lot of fans in our comment section. And I think that's with good reason. But McIntosh is a pretty popular player. And if you make the list of like potential surprise breakout names, McIntosh shows up. Jordan Harris here, I'm assuming not the UGA basketball player, but if you make a list of breakout names, McIntosh has got a lot of steam from our commenters about being that guy this season. All the more reason we need to be playing some football here this year. Dallas Schwartz says, he says the season will be played. Looking forward to seeing you guys at the Kroger kickoff. Can't wait to see you there, Dallas, as well. Looking forward to that. Frank Patterson also says he thinks that K-Mac's going to get some quality carries. The thing that I was pleasantly surprised with about McIntosh is that when I saw him last year, whether it be during practice or in the moments we get to play in games, he came across as a more athletic player than I assumed that he would look like as a freshman. You sort of thought of him as kind of a goal line back when Georgia brought him in, but really, I think last year he showed he was a lot more than that. What you expect a typical Georgia running back to look like, McIntosh kind of looks like that. So I understand where the love for Kenny's coming from. I really do. Let's do a couple more and get ready to get out of here. I kind of chronicled some of this before a lot of you kind of got on the show today, but we kind of get into what's next for Georgia at running back. Why Jonathan Jefferson is a very special defensive line recruit for Georgia. Maybe exactly the kind of thing that Kirby Smart's looking for an interior defensive tackle. We talk about Tony Grimes, the 5-star cornerback, some very complimentary things he said about Georgia as of late, and apparently some quite complimentary things that Georgia has said about Grimes. We asked about what Matt Luke is looking for from his offensive lineman going forward. We get into Elijah Judy. I talked about DeAndre Swift here on video a moment ago about his connection to Philadelphia. Judy's also from Philadelphia as well. So we got into a lot of stuff today on recruiting with Jeff Sentell as part of our podcast. It'll be up at DawgNation.com or all the podcast platforms, Spotify, Apple, Google, SoundCloud pretty soon. So, Lindsay, if you want some good recruiting news, a really good conversation with Jeff Sentell here today, and I hope you'll check that out. All right, a couple more. We got to get ready to go after that. Realistic One says that he thinks there'll only be a specified number of fans allowed to attend games. Yeah, who knows? I mean, I think there's a lot of creativity about to be employed across an entire, litany of sports here. So, Realistic One, you may end up being right about all of that. I know where you're coming from on that. Let's see if we can get a couple more and get out of here. Frank Patterson mentioned Will Shipley. At this point in time, I think that Will's probably heading somewhere else, probably not Georgia at the moment. Shipley's a good player, but it seems like Georgia may be zeroing in on some other names more so right now. Green Soldier says rumored that summer practice will take place in replacement of spring practice. Any truth to that? I know that's the hopeful thing that a lot of coaches and administrators have, is that you could expand summer practice to make up for the lost spring practice. But, I mean, as someone who's as optimistic as anyone, I'll be the first to acknowledge, as a country, as a world, we have to get a lot healthier to be able to do that. But I hope that's what happens. I hope that's what happens. Mike D says always buffering. Is it really buffering on YouTube? Have y'all had a problem with that today? I hope not. I haven't had any kind of interruption. It doesn't seem like, but I hope that's not the case. All right, we're gonna get ready to go. Anything else on Facebook before we do? Hugh Nash says, can you imagine a front three of Davis, Walker, and Carter? Yeah, I mean, for their various position fits, all three of those guys are like the top end athlete for that. And I even include Jordan Davis in that discussion as a nose guard. When it comes to giant space eating nose guards, Davis he's got pretty nice feet for someone who's in that spot. He had 2.5 sacks a year ago for Georgia. So when it comes to very impressive bodies on the defensive line, Georgia would seem to be heading in that direction, which is a fun thing to think about. I'm going to do more on Trey Scott on the podcast at some point in time this week, but Georgia's certainly heading in that direction. As we get ready to wrap up here, let me say thanks to R.S. Andrews for making the R.S. Andrews cool down possible, air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric. R.S. Andrews can do all those things for us. They do all of those things for you. Story after story, they've been delivering smiles. They can deliver a smile for you as well. But you got to check them out online at rsandrews.com. Let me also thank Engineered Solutions of Georgia. ESOG is a proud partner of UGA when it comes to waterproofing stuff there. You can give them a call, 678-ESOG now. That's 678-ESOG now. That'll get you in touch with Engineered Solutions of Georgia. I would be ashamed to get out of here without also giving my buddy Eddie some screen time. Eddie, of course, will remind you that a good Georgia fan is a Gator hater, first and foremost. More so than anything else. That's the message that we keep sending, even during this time. And by the way, through the magic of low-tech capabilities, I'll remind you, the Gator Hater Updater now stands at 1,249 days. That's 1,249 days. That's how long it's been since those lousy, stinking Gators have beaten the Georgia Bulldogs. Y'all, I say it every day, but I'm going to say it again. Thanks so much for being a part of DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. If I did not have this outlet to talk to all of you, I believe I just might go crazy. So thanks for helping keep me sane. Thanks for helping me keep up to date on how the beard's kind of coming in. We're having some fun doing that. I've got a podcast to record. I'll look forward to doing that and then talking to you back here again tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. for DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Y'all have a great day, and I'll look forward to speaking to you then.